Welcome to Grow Black Leaders,
your go-to source for all things leadership, growth, and development.
for Black leaders, by Black leaders. Let's grow. Welcome to the Grow Black Leaders podcast, where we exist to create an ecosystem, a community, a space where Black leaders cultivate Black leaders. Look, we understand that leadership itself, it's hard, it's complex, it's difficult. And when you add being Black to that, there are specific nuances that we encounter in being Black leaders. So we've created this space for conversation that will inspire you on your leadership journey. I am so excited. I know that you are very excited too. This is one of the interviews that we have been waiting to do. We are so excited to interview Dr. Hart Ramsey today. I will tell you that I got an opportunity to be introduced to Dr. Hart Ramsey 3 years ago before getting a chance to meet him. And I told him this, he was someone that I admired from a distance. You know, if you are exposed to any part of his ministry or just even just him as a man, he's always oozing with wisdom. He has so much to say. I love that he seems to be proficient in both psychology and hoodology at the same time. And that thing blesses me. So I told him, I said, man, I admired you for such a long time. I would see the types of things you would say in posts. I love your wisdom. You're a leader who I have looked up to from afar. And literally overnight, I found myself in conversation with him on a daily basis as we were navigating some changes and transitions. I've always been clear about my love for him, my honor for him, my respect for him, who he is as a man. I also, I want to be like him when I grow up because he is drinking from the fountain of youth. Y'all, the first few times that I got to encounter him, a lot of the conversations were via Zoom. And I was trying to figure out, what are you drinking? Because how do you look like that at that age? You tell me, because this is what I want my story to be. I know you really enjoy Dr. Hart as well. You love his wisdom. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely love his wisdom. In fact, I told Ronaldo this morning, I was like, I am so excited about the interviews that we have planned today, specifically because of the wealth of wisdom and knowledge that I know is going to come from all of them. But this one in particularly, I know is going to be phenomenal.
Absolutely. So we are so glad to welcome you to the Grow Black Leaders podcast today, Dr. Hart Ramsey. So glad
How are you doing, Melissa? The introduction alone, I was tickled, man. Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I know this. A lot of people know who you are. A lot of people have been exposed to you. God has blessed you throughout the years to amass a wealth of wisdom through quite expansive leadership story, things that you've done, even the fact that you built something quite amazing, a whole dome in a community that nobody would have seen something of that magnitude in Dothan. And I'm not listening. If you're listening from Dothan, don't think that I'm trying to insult y'all. I'm just saying, nobody expects a dome in Dothan. This man flying a helicopter. Come on, somebody. Just so much vision, but not just vision, execution. And really the gap between vision and execution is leadership. So all of what you've been able to amass has been because you have such a strong leadership ability and capacity. I want you to share with our audience, though, who is Dr. Hart Ramsey? For those who may be listening and may not be exposed to you, tell them a little bit about who you are.
Well, first of all, that's a great question. I think Hart Ramsey is a student at heart. And I study life, I study people, I study success, I study failure. And through the lens of compassion, I get a chance to extract the best of everyone's story. So early on, what I tried to do was to study the failures first. And to kind of connect with the person who experienced the failure, not to see them as a failure, but to see them as a teacher, because they've been through something that others have not been through. And so for early on, I was drawn to these stories, success stories, but also stories of failure, to find what the commonalities were and to kind of better myself. I've always seen myself as a student first. And so the best way to memorize or to remember a lesson is to share it. And so I became known as a teacher, but really what I am is a student, and I continue to be a student throughout my entire life. The leadership aspect of this is just people being drawn to the things that I've learned and experienced and the way that I see. And so thank you for having me. I want to share as much as I can to help as many people as possible.
You are so welcome. We are privileged to have you. And I'll say it's interesting that he said that because I rarely hear people talk about studying failures. And my wife can tell you, I almost feel bad sometimes because I'll walk up to someone or, I have to have a relationship. Now, I'm not insulting, like, I don't even know you. And I'm coming in and asking, tell me about why this failed. But for people who have been in my life and in my world, and I've had the opportunity to encounter them, if I've seen some level of failure in their lives, I try to learn from it. There's two ways that you can gain wisdom. I always say you gain it through direct experience or you allow somebody else's experience to direct you. Either way, you can gain wisdom by having a desire and a thirst for it. So studying failure is a great way to grow. And a lot of people, I feel, miss out on the opportunity to develop because of that. Now, I know you've been leading a long time. You have led in so many different ways. You are a leader of leaders, right? You have one of the things I love, and I told my wife, I'm just like, he just has such a fatherly presence. When I first started encountering you, it would just feel like any conversation that I had felt rich in nature, even when you were not trying to. So I know that where you are on your leadership journey, your trajectory has led you in so many directions and you have so many leadership stories. I'd love to know, though, if you could reach way back, because I know you got to go far back for this one.
No, you got to go that far.
No, I like that.
You don't look like what you've been through, right? I would love to know, what is your earliest memory of leadership? What was your earliest memory of you assuming some type of leadership?
That's a great question. And believe it or not, I was about 8 years old.
Wow.
And I would go. So imagine playing playground football in elementary school. And there's a strange phenomenon that whenever we would pick sides, whether at recess or after school or even at home playing football, touch or tag football in the streets, when we would pick teams, everyone wanted to be on my team. And I ended up being the de facto leader in almost every situation I was in. And at first, it didn't seem like, it felt like popularity. It felt like people just liked me. But my initial experience with leadership was telling people what to do to win a game. And it came from me watching football on television and kind of learn the rules and learn the positions and then going out to play. And then when we're lining up and we're not lining up right, I'm saying, no, you go here, you go there, you do this, and we're running plays. And so my first experience with leadership was this natural, authentic influence that came from me just trying to mimic what I saw.
Wow.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Here's the thing about it. The thing about it is I didn't see it as leadership. I saw it as sport.
Yeah.
But I think early on we have these indicators as to the level of influence that we have, because leadership is at its basic, it is influence, having the influence to move things, to shape things, to push things, to build things,
Yes,
and to build people. So yeah,
I love that. And I will say one of the things that I found interesting is you made this statement. First of all, the fact that you were 8, that's very early. And I would say that a lot of people who lead for a long time, they have stories like that, where their leadership journey typically began in their childhood, before they could even identify it. You said something in particular, though, that I was like, man, I know that there are people in our listening audience that would love to hear you maybe expound on this particular topic. You talked about, you were in situations where you were always the de facto leader. So that you had that starting point, but throughout your lifetime, you would just end up in situations where you emerged as the leader. And as someone who's encountered that, and I've heard that from a lot of people who end up leading for a long time. That's their story. There's this dance between, though, accepting that, so realizing that if a leader is needed, I'm likely to emerge, right? Because I'm so used to that. And then there's well, I don't want to look like I'm just always trying to hog the leadership responsibility, And then there's I don't feel like leading today. So it's all three. It's I know that I'm going to emerge as the leader. There's I don't want people to think that I'm just the one that's trying to lead all the time. And then there's literally I'm sick of y'all always trying to think that I'm the one to lead. I just want to follow today. For our listeners, and I am certain we have some of those, and I'm about to be a student to this because this is my own story. I want to hear from you, or what would you say to me, to our listening audience, of how you learn to process that, or do you still process it? Help us to understand if this is going to be just a part of what our journey looks like, or is there a point where you just reach the resolve of understanding your leadership identity no matter what?
Yeah. So what happened with me was I was the guy that would always have my back against the wall before I became a Christian. When I would go to the club, I stand with my back against the wall. I was never the guy. I wasn't the extrovert. I'm an introvert in nature. So I would always try to shun it unless I was passionate about it. And so leadership can drain you if you don't know how to manage your strength. And so if you don't know how to recover, if you don't know the types of things that really pull more energy from you, leadership can be draining. And so what I learned to do was I learned to kind of monitor myself as well as monitor the situation. And there were times that I would reject the leadership, but there were also situations where the thing wouldn't work unless I gave what I was thinking. Because the thing, and you know this from your own experience, is that one of the key things about a leader is you'll be in a situation where everyone is wondering what we're going to do, and you see the answer.
Yep.
And sometimes you're amazed that no one else can see it. And so by virtue of the fact that you see the answer, you know it should be done. But when you say, well, have you thought about, and from the moment you open your mouth and say, have you thought about, and all of a sudden they take you and they push you to the center or push you to the front, and you're leading whether or not you want to. So my experience has been that even when I don't want to lead, leadership will call me. It's because of it's who I am. And if you're extrovert, you tend to kind of rush to the situation to shorten the time frame of getting the thing done. If you're introvert, you think it through and you go, should I say this? How will I be perceived? Will it work? So being an introvert, I ask so many questions before I actually engage in leading and inviting others to follow.
Wow. I'll say this, and I know my wife is going to move us to our next step, but one, I met you because I was thrust into leading a very complex and complicated situation, right?
Yeah,
So
yes,
I was thrust overnight into this is the scenario, and we need someone to steer it. And, I'm grateful now for the opportunity because it created this relationship that I really do value. You said something, though, and this was nowhere in our plan for this conversation, but when you said these words together, I said, man, I need him to speak to our audience. He talked about the fact that, or you talked about the fact that leadership can drain you, right? And I know that we have some drained leaders listening to this podcast today. So we have a lot of other exciting things to talk about. But I want to pause for a minute for those who heard that and that resonated with them. They're like, wait a minute, you're in my world right now. I'm drained. What would you say to encourage leaders who are listening to this podcast today that feel drained? What would you say to them to help them to continue navigating forward on their journey?
Well, if you're a leader who has led well, then you have to trust that there are people in your sphere of influence who have received from you. And at some point, you're going to have to allow them to carry the leadership burden on the level that they're able to. Not everyone around you is learning from you, but there are a few. And notice I said if you're a leader that has led well, because there's some leaders that don't lead well, not because they don't want to, but because maybe they don't have access to help or they don't have access to the information about how to lead well. And so what that looks like is a leader who wants to do everything yourself. You always want to be the person to take charge of even the minor situations. I think the delegation is important for a leader to protect your strength. And if you're already in a place where you're kind of depleted, you've got to value rest. Let me tell you something. If the axe is dull and you don't take the time to sharpen it, you're going to have to use more strength. And it's going to drain you more. I know that you've heard people say, well, if I don't lead, it won't get done. If I'm not there, it won't work. That is not true. It's a deception we tell ourselves. I've seen leaders who will not rest and take time for themselves. I've seen them die. Then I've watched the organization choose another leader and either go in another direction or go to another level. That organization would have done well had you taken the proper time to rest. And so I want to suggest this. I want to throw this out there. If you're in charge, you need 4 major vacations a year, and then I would say you need 12 minor ones. And what's the 12 minor ones is 1 weekend out of every month. Okay. And you need at least 7 days out of every quarter. You've got to value and prioritize your rest. If you don't, and you're in a drain situation, then what's supposed to be enjoyable can become an extreme burden. And I think you'll shorten your capacity to lead into the future.
Wow.
That is absolutely powerful, because I think as leaders, many times we can become neglectful, of our need to rest and to take that sabbatical. But what I found is most of the times when people don't rest or they don't delegate, it's because of a lack of trust. Like they do not trust their team. They don't really trust their leaders that they have in place. And they feel that, hey, if I don't do this, it might not get done, or somebody will drop the ball. What would you say to those leaders? Like, how could they really, or what is it that they need to do to build this measure of trust among their team so that they can rest? Because I think that's not, some people are struggling with that, and it's something that they need to know, because if they don't rest, it will burn them out. And we know that.
What I would say, and that's a great question. What I think needs to happen is, so I use a system. It is teach, touch, train, transform. And I this is a hip pocket system that I use. It's not anything official. Teach, touch, train, transform. And what the goal is, especially as we deal with leaders, is to build predictability. Trust is anchored to predictability. I can't trust you any more than you are predictable. If I can't predict what you're going to do, I won't trust you. And so what so I have to train my leaders to the point where I could predict. For example, if I have to go somewhere or take a break, I know who to put in position to get the predictable results that I desire. That's the word predictability. We have married the term predictability to boring, to stagnant, but it's not true. Predictability is what we're looking for. Matter of fact, we build reputation. We earn income based on the predictability of how we're going to perform. And so I believe as we deal with our leaders, the teaching part, we instruct them, we give them the knowledge that we have so they could have our heads, right? What the touch part of it is they will have our hearts. I mean, they spend time with us. They do life together with us. They see us in real life situations. And then from there, the training part is critical, because in the training part, I allow them to perform while I critique. I don't believe in constructive criticism. I think that's an oxymoron. I think you're either constructive or you're critical. But sure. I do believe in critiquing a situation, giving them positive or negative feedback as to how they perform. That training piece is necessary. And the goal is I want you to transform to the place where I can predict how you're going to perform. That is critical to me, to every leadership situation. And I disqualify leaders from my mentorship based on their willingness to submit to this formula. If you can't submit to the formula, I don't care who you are to me. I could be friends with you, but I can't lead you. Wow. I can't lead you because this is a part of what I do. This is how I lead. And I think that as a leader, we get to a certain place where we have to become a little stringent as to our expectation. I don't think we'll do people. It's like a coach. If you're going to coach a winning team, you have to be, I won't use the word tough, but you have to have a set mentality, a set goal as to what you want the outcome to be. If not, you're going to drain yourself doing the work of the people who are alongside you. If you're walking with me and you're not helping me, then what's the point? Right?
what is even the point?
What is even the point? I mean, what are we doing here? So, yeah.
Wow, that was good. First of all, I was like, is this in a book somewhere?
And it's not. Not yet.
You might, I'm just saying, you might want to put that in the book, because I think I would definitely buy it if it was in the book. Because I think that it was so rich, because many times leaders, they need that insight and help to get them to a certain place where they desire to be, but they may not know necessarily the steps or have that insight, or that's able to pour into them to help them to get to that next place. Well, I know that you have been leading for quite some time, and you've been sitting in top leadership positions for a long time as well. But I want to know, so from your perspective, I'm sure the reality of leading looks like a certain thing, but what was your perception in the beginning of what leadership would look like versus the reality of it?
One of the key things that, for me, I saw leadership as a vertical journey, as a hierarchy, so to speak. And my perception was we have to work our way up. What I didn't realize was that in my reality, leadership is more horizontal. It's not that I'm trying to go up, it's that I'm trying to go forward. And so that difference changed the way I see leadership. For example, early on, I would try to be over people, because I saw that in the Bible. And the Bible is one of my leadership manuals. And so I would try to be, the Bible says, if you're over the people, right? But the language of being over, this Greek word hyper, it's not so much that I'm over them, it's that I oversee them. And in order to do that, I owe them something. So I have this concept: leadership is knowing the way, going the way, and then showing the way. It happens to rhyme, but it works. So my reality became leadership is actually being out in front of the people, going first, planning the way, taking the hits, seeing what's ahead, surveying the land, and then coming back with a strategy to say, this is what we need to do, this is how we need to do it. Thus, the concept of vision becomes important, because it's not until I may go to a higher ground to survey what's in front of us, but I don't lead from the higher ground. I go to the higher ground to perceive. Then I come back down the hill and I say, okay, guys, what's out in front of us is this. Here's what we need to do. And I'm leading not from an elevated place, but from a place that's out in front. It's not, oh, you go, it's follow me. So I know the way. I know what we need to do. And I go the way. That gives them confidence to follow. That's where fellowship comes from. And then I show the way. The things that need to be negotiated or done, then I show them how to do it. The disconnect now, where we become very, very disappointed with leaders, is leaders who know the way and can show the way, but they don't go the way. You see what I'm saying? And so what happens is we become frustrated because they put demands on us that they don't put on themselves. It takes effort to go the way. It takes investment. It takes sacrifice. It takes submission to go the way. It takes trust to go the way. And so as a leader, my perception shifted from the hierarchy of leadership to the reality of I am the scout. I'm the one that goes forward. And that way I get to enjoy the people I'm working with. Not, people say leadership is lonely at the top. It's because we're never supposed to be at the top. You're supposed to be out front.
You better preach.
Wow.
Just a walking evangelist script.
Just so many nuggets. I'm like trying to see which one do I really, pull out. But I think you said so many good things, which we literally were having this conversation this morning.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast about leadership expectations and how many times we set expectations on the people that we lead, but we don't necessarily have high expectations for ourselves. And I was like, and it was like the podcast, it really like pricked me because it caused me to go inward. Whereas many times as leaders, I think we just focus on what others need to do and what others need to change. But okay, what are some things that I need to change about myself to make sure that I put high expectations on myself so that I can have high expectations of my people? Because I think many times people, they get frustrated if you're telling them what to do, but they're looking at you and they're like, you a mess. You're not even doing what you're telling us to do. So I felt like that was so good. But
I was gonna say too, it's like there's the other side of that. You have those leaders who have extremely high expectations of themselves. So it's weird. It's like you sit between both worlds. You have those that are like, do as I say, not as I do. But then you have those others that it's like, and I feel I can fall in this category. And I have people around me who are always like, you got to remember, everybody is not like you, and I'll get frustrated because I have trained myself to do an extremely high output in every lane that I'm in. And so I'll find my expectation of people will be through the roof. And sometimes I'm making them uncomfortable because they will feel that my expectation is out of reach. And that's hard as a leader too. Like, how do you process, I'm giving my all, I'm exerting all this energy, I'm trying my best to give you the tools you need to be successful. And then it's like, because let's be honest, the frustration of leadership is when the outcome does not look like the expectation. That's the bottom line. It's like, I saw this, I expected it, I don't get it because I just I know in myself, right, that I communicated this well. I took this from what I saw and I spoke this. I was eloquent. I pontificated, and what we produced is still a mess. And I am upset about you.
Wait, it's okay. So that's another thing, because sometimes as leaders, we can set low expectations because they may feel like what you're asking me to do is too unreasonable or it's unrealistic. So as leaders, sometimes we may lower what we know that they're capable of doing. But I think that's
the balance.
I just want to say that. What is the balance between having a low expectation and then setting it too? I don't know if setting it too high is a thing, because I was also listening to the podcast and that was a question. Like, what if the expectation is just unrealistic? And the guy answered, he was like, I would rather, not literally, but he was like, I would rather die trying to reach a high expectation. And if I don't meet the expectation, at least where I do land, it will exceed what I might have been able to do in my own natural ability. It's like almost like that saying where you shoot for the moon and you land among the stars or somewhere like that.
It's still
Right. So I think that's good.
Now we got to get your take on this, because look, you got a lot of years under, not listen, this man looks very young, but he got some years under him and he has seen both. I am certain that you've had the time that you like, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and deal with these results. And then you have the times that you're trying to really raise people up and you're just caught between both worlds. What would you say to that leader who feels like they literally are a leadership dichotomy, like they're going in and out of both of these realities?
So I think it's all about the goal. And I think that leaders should always stretch their teams, but we have to know who our teams are. What I do when I choose leaders based on the parts of me that are the weakest. I staff my weakness. And so when I bring people in, I measure them for capacity, for insight, for their strengths and weaknesses. And I'm not going to let them underperform. So I'm always pushing, I'll always ask of them a little bit more than I expect them to perform. That way, if they don't perform to the highest level, we still get what we need. But then I will talk them through it and ask questions. I'll interview their failure to find out why didn't you come through on this? What was the problem? What did I do wrong in trying to motivate you to do this? And sometimes you'll find a lack of desire or a lack of maturity, or maybe a lack of information, or maybe a person just a lack of self-confidence. And either way, we're able to tweak that and get the person to perform better. And sometimes when you push people at that level, you have to be careful not to overstretch them, because some people will give up and go to something easier. To a point that you made, I think that if we don't give people things to reach for, they will become bored. Because as they follow, if you are a high capacity leader, you are inadvertently creating high capacity leaders around you. And so at some point, they're going to want more and more. But then there's some people, they just want to come to work. They don't want to do more. They just want to do what they do make a paycheck or make a living and go home. They don't see the value of stretching. And I think we have to be balanced in our stretching, but it's all about the capacity of the people that you gather around you to help lead. Does that make sense?
It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. See the value of stretching. On the other side of the stretch, there's an opportunity for growth, and I think a lot of people miss out on growth because one of the things I think we've trained ourselves to do in society is to seek comfort way too much. I think even generationally, that thing is it's getting out of control. What I feel like the intentions were good, because people definitely shifted the focus to help people to understand how to take care of their mental health or how to rest well. We talked about this earlier. These things are super important. But what has happened to some is they've digested that through the lens of how do I find more comfort for myself? And most times when we are growing as leaders or when we're growing as individuals, we are becoming uncomfortable momentarily to learn to train ourselves how to operate at another level. So I love going to the gym. I never would have thought that I would be a gym rat, but I am one, right? And I give people this example a lot. I'm like, when I go to the gym, matter of fact, I was just in there yesterday. And because I've been on this certain journey, I cut, recently, so I lost some weight. So where I would normally max out on I was doing incline dumbbell on chest, right? And chest press. And so where I would normally max out, I struggled a little bit more, And so my friend who trains me, he was like, that's because you lost that weight. And, so, you're weak. You got to know him. Be like that. And I'm like, I'm not weak. I will show you. But I look at the gym and the whole process is about how much discomfort and resistance you can create for your body momentarily so that it can grow. Right. So we like what's on the other side of the discomfort. We like what's on the other side of the resistance, but we rarely enjoy the journey of going through that. And so, so many people miss the opportunity to grow in their leadership capacity or even just grow their own capacity around the skill sets that they've been given because of that, their desire to disassociate with discomfort. And it was something you said earlier that I feel like we just got to rewind on, because you just say things and then you be like, yeah, I said it, like drop the mic. And I'm like, it's it. Okay, we need to go back on what you said earlier when you talked about, and I feel like there are listeners who need you to help them to retrain and reframe their mindset around only seeing leadership as going up, right? And I do believe that that's a more novice mindset of leadership. Even those who haven't gotten into leadership yet, they think of leadership that way. How do you retrain your mindset that leadership is not about going up, but about going forward? Because I agree wholeheartedly with you that the best leaders, they go out front and they help people they go and clear the pathway so that those who are following have an easier journey than what they would have had without a leader, right? And that's a retraining of the mind. How can someone shift in their mindset around leadership not being about going up, but going forward?
That's a good question as well. So remember, I gave the 4 T's. So the 4 T's deal with teaching, touching. Oh, what's the third one? You remember it?
The last one was transform.
Was the third
I know.
one.
So see, now here's the real life example of when you are a student and then you forgot what the teacher just taught.
I want to go to the fourth one quickly. I was going to give you a quick test, but we go back and review it. But the fourth one is transforming, but there's a training factor, right? And so what has to happen in the second phase, the touch phase, is that this is the part where you actually bring your leaders in and you do life with them, right? And as you do life with them, as you touch them more, you begin to learn about the level of performance they can operate at. To me, anyone that's going to change their mindset from a hierarchy to we on the same level has to touch the people around them enough to understand that these are high performance people. It's in the touch part of this lesson of this development that I get to see what they made of, and then I learn to respect that. What comes out of that is now we are a real team. You got it? Now we're a real team. Now we come to the place where we're doing life together. And so as we grow together, as it relates to our moving forward, and it's not, there's no, ambition does not sneak in. Ambition is dangerous. What ambition does is it begins to become jealous and envious about who's above whom. If I keep everyone at the same level and give them this space, then it makes for a stronger team. The whole idea of elevation, this person, we use it a lot. This person's elevated. It's wrong to me. No, this person has been given a different capacity, a different responsibility, right? I was speaking to a leader recently, and the leader was saying how he has a strong team, but his thing was he kept asking the question, well, who's in charge? I was listening in this meeting. He kept asking, well, who's in charge? Who does this belong to? And so finally I inserted myself and I said, well, the issue now is not who's in charge. The issue is who's in charge of this area that we're talking about, and it's not you. See what I'm saying? So after the meeting, I had to take a separate call from that particular leader who was in charge of everything. And he said, I think you undermined me in front of my team. I said, no. I said, I stopped you from undermining yourself. Because what you were doing was you were using this moment that should have been for team building to exalt your ego. And what you should have done was to defer, because here was his fear. His fear was, this is my company and you're giving ownership to this person. Because he actually said those words. He said he walk around here like he owns stuff. I'm like, he does own that part of it. And you need to let him own it to a certain degree. Now, he knows where the buck stopped, that the buck stops with you, but let him own that. Because if you want to see his full capacity, then you let him own it and see how much of it he can carry. That does a lot for you, instead of the mentality of I'm in charge. That shift from the hierarchy to the horizontal style of leadership is a maturity issue in senior leaders. You have to mature. You've been with people, you've been with leaders who have high performing, high capacity leaders with them, but they keep shrinking them down. And it has nothing to do with the work it has to do with the ego. It has to do with the person who still has the mentality that I'm supposed to be above. Right? So yeah. Hope that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sometimes I talk in not circles, so to speak, but I speak in a way where it makes a lot of sense up here because I see it as I'm speaking it, but I want to make sure that the flow is right.
Yeah.
So that the leaders who are listening could understand that I'm not saying that you don't aspire to be more. I'm just saying that what more looks like is different from what we've been taught.
I love that. I want to ask you this question. What do you wish that other leaders, older leaders, as you were getting started on your journey, what do you wish they would have told you about leadership?
About leadership. I wish they had told me about the toll it takes on you. That there'll be times when you're leading, when you're absolutely exhausted. This is a perfect answer. It's not that you're exhausted as much as you're discouraged. Leaders did not talk about, I think they hid from us the fact that many times they led people while they themselves were absolutely not just exhausted physically, but mentally and emotionally, they were just discouraged. Because although some of the projects were hitting the mark, or the majority, because it takes a lot to put yourself out there to get things done, and you're gonna hit and miss, and the misses take their toll, and the losses and and as a leader, you're gonna be misunderstood anyway. Then the criticism that comes, and sometimes you have to continue to lead, and you're discouraged. So when I experienced it, I thought something was wrong with me until I sat down with a leader and he went, that's par for the course. That's leadership. And I'm like, why didn't somebody tell me that? I didn't read it in any books. I read all the things about leadership. I experienced a lot of things. But how do you keep winning when you're discouraged? So I had to build that muscle. It's a muscle that every leader has to build, where when you're not your best, when you have a certain amount of disappointment, for maybe you've lost certain people, or maybe something did not turn out like you said, you didn't get what you expected, you're disappointed, you're a little discouraged, but you still got to go to the next thing. I don't think we talk about that enough and teach people how to build the muscle of resiliency, even when it seemed like the last project, your pet project, it didn't work out, and you still grieving it. So you're grieving the loss of that project, but you have to go to another one. They don't talk about that enough.
Oh, that's good.
That is good. That's good. That's good. So I wanted to ask, what is the greatest obstacle or challenge that you faced in your leadership journey?
Okay, so first I'm gonna tell you about my definition of obstacles. So there's opponents, right? The enemies against you. There's opposition. That's the things that your enemies or that life positions in your way. And then there's obstructions, as it's stuff that normally your enemies build against you. And then there's obstacles. For me, obstacles are different because obstacles are usually internal challenges. Like they're not the same, and we speak of these four as if they're one and the same. Obstacles, opposition, opponents, obstruction. But obstacles are my limitations. So I can answer from that perspective. Normally for me, it was there are four. One is the relationship obstacle. I didn't realize initially how horrible I was at relationships. I didn't know that I would retreat when relationship became difficult. I didn't know that I had two gears. I would either be passive or aggressive. I was never passive aggressive, but either passive or aggressive, and I had to learn assertiveness. I had to learn the middle ground, which is being assertive, right? So the first one was a relationship obstacle. The second obstacle for me was maturity. The problem with immaturity, the only cure for immaturity is growth, and growth takes time. So what I had to do for myself was to allow myself the luxury, so to speak, of growing and actually kind of journaling or tracking my growth so I could give myself a pat on the back and say, well, you grew through that. So I dealt with the maturity obstacle. I also dealt with I talked about the discouragement obstacle. I would get discouraged quickly because I was also invested in every project, in every person I was leading. I become discouraged if they didn't hit a marker or whatever. The fourth obstacle for me, and this is the last one, is a communication obstacle. I realized I was not as good a communicator as I thought I was. From this perspective, I was not able to convey what was on my heart in well enough for those who were following to hit the mark. And that's why you hear me say a lot. Does that make sense to you? It's something I say a lot because I didn't care at first. I said it, you got it, let's go. But I learned that people speak different languages and people learn differently and people hear differently. And so these obstacles, they were unexpected for me because they literally caught me off guard. That there's a relationship issue, there's a maturity issue, there's a discouragement and a communication issue. These obstacles were the greatest obstacles for me. And I refer to them as obstacles because it started with me. I couldn't put the blame on them. I had to say, this is something I need to become better at. Relationship, growth, discouragement, and communication.
I know you just gave some incredible language to a lot of listeners because they are encountering exactly what you have spoken of. They felt weird about it, strange. Sometimes on your leadership journey, you feel misunderstood. Nobody really gets it. You can feel alone in some ways because it's like, well, this part of me, you wouldn't even understand if I said it. So I'm going to just keep this. So thank you for giving language to a lot of people who are tuned in and they feel a little bit more normal. They feel seen. I wish we had unlimited time to talk to you because, and I know that this will not be the last conversation with you because it's way more in you to share in our audience. They are seeing and hearing that just through this dialogue. But I want you to speak to the new leader. As we land this interview today, I want you to speak to the new leader that's listening and they're just trying to figure out what they need to do as they're starting their leadership journey. If you had to give any wisdom nuggets to someone who's new in leadership, just some advice that will carry them forward on this journey, what would you say to new leaders who are listening in today?
And this may seem so basic, but know where you want to go. Know where you want to go. When you walk into the room, don't come into the room and survey the room and decide where you want to go based on the opinions of those in the room. When you come to the situation, as a matter of fact, even before you take the assignment, make sure the assignment is for you. Make sure your skill set, what you bring to the table, what you're already aware of, can fix the situation, can make the situation better. There's so much within the scope of that. I would say have the hard conversations early. Be as kind as possible, but don't compromise the mission for the sake of sparing feelings. Don't try to hurt people, but don't try to deliver them from the reality of the situation. So know where you're going, but then you have the hard conversations. Be as kind as possible. Don't compromise the mission for the sake of sparing feelings, but you've got to know that you've got to just tell the truth about the situation so that people can know what's real and what's not. My final bit of information or advice is risk more. And when I say risk more, I mean safety is a myth. It's a myth, or it hinders us from expanding and from experiencing more. And so when I say risk, let me qualify that. Risk is defined as a chance taken in an economic enterprise. What I mean by taking the chance is you go forward. This word risk is an old maritime or seafaring word, and it deals with the danger of losing your ship, losing your life, losing your crew, losing the goods and properties that you're transporting. And so when you talk about risk, you're talking about what could happen on the way to your destination. Okay? You've got to have the mentality that I could stay safe, but leadership is not about safety. It's about deliverables. It's about getting to where you're supposed to be. So as a young leader, right, if you're going to make a mark, if you're going to accomplish anything, sometimes you have to undertake what people say cannot be done. It can't be done by them, but it certainly can be done by you.
Woo! It can't be done by them, but it can certainly be done by you. This man says safety is a myth. That bless you. Somebody, that was what they needed for the whole conversation. Wait a minute. Safety is a myth. You know, we had a conversation with Duhart about the same thing. And he gave very similar advice about taking risks. And this is a conversation we have a lot because we're wired so differently. Like my wife is like, listen, safety is her portion. And
safety good. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Like safety is her portion, okay? And I'm the exact opposite. I'm not rogue or foolish, but I will take risks. And I believe that, you know, they do lead to great opportunities. And I even said this to her this morning. We were talking about risk this morning. And I said, this is where I do put that saying, you only live once, like into practice. And my mind is like, well, I may as well go for it. Like, what am I waiting for? You know, if I have this chance in front of me, what am I waiting for? Like, I need to at least try and accept that, you know, failure, because you may fail when you take a risk, but it'll be a teacher. And sometimes you need some exposure to failure to train your resilience for your next step towards success, you know? So I wish we could just keep talking.
No, it was so good.
Yes. Dr. Hart, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that our listeners have been just enriched by the conversation that we have had. So much wisdom. We appreciate you taking time to be with us on today, and we value you so much. To those who are listening, thank you so much also for listening into this episode. We do not take it for granted that you give us any portion of your day in the hustle and bustle of life and the busyness of your schedule. Remember, here at Grow Black Leaders, we exist to create a space, a community, an ecosystem where Black leaders cultivate Black leaders. And we hope that this episode has grown you in your leadership today. Until next time, keep growing, and we look forward to you tuning in. Oh, I also have to say, before we let you go, Dr. Hart, how can they remain in touch with you and what you're doing? I know that you're out here. Let me tell y'all now, this man, he specializes in both psychology and criminology, so you're going to get a little bit of both. He's diverse in his expression. But tell them how they can stay in touch with what you're doing.
So you can catch me on all the socials. I'm on Facebook as Hart Ramsey. I'm on Instagram and X, Twitter, that's now X, as Hart Ramsey. And look for the check mark, because there are a lot of imposters out there.
All right. Again, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for those of you who have tuned in to this episode. We look forward to inspire you on the next one. So stay tuned and keep growing in your leadership.
Thank you for tuning in to Grow Black Leaders. Don't let your growth journey stop here.
Be sure to subscribe and visit our website,
growblackleaders.com and follow us on social media at Grow Black Leaders.